say hi to those people.
This meeting is being recorded.
What? Was that a new voice?
No, somebody is unmuted.
Oh, is that what it is? That was just, God, what is Zoom doing? That
Things that
voice.
Zoom does best. All right, well, look, we've got lots and lots of people here
Yeah,
on my screen.
that's what
I can
happens when
see
you put two rock stars
Jennifer.
together.
Whoa, I don't think I've ever seen you in person.
You're right.
Hello. Great.
Yeah. Hi,
So
Siri
many
by the
people.
window.
Yeah. Everybody. Oh, Samantha's here. Hi, Samantha.
Samantha, hey.
It's sorts of old friends and new friends.
Yeah.
All right.
Wait a minute. Somebody's picture just, I thought it was really them. And I was like, why aren't they moving? They're really smiling for a long time.
They're happy.
They're so happy it's Friday. They're like, TGIF. Let's go crazy.
No kidding. There's Julia Rose alone.
Tilke, your parents. I just keep looking at them smiling every time I'm letting somebody in, then I see them again.
Lots of folks. Nice. All right. Okay, Amy. How are we
Yeah,
doing? You want me to
okay.
let people in?
Okay, they're gonna
I
still
got the
come.
recording
I
on.
didn't want
We're
to tell
good.
Tilke or Natalie, but 400 people signed up for this today.
That's a lot of
Don't be
people.
nervous. All right. Oh, Rachel
No.
Stopka. Wait a minute. Hold on. Here comes Natalie's fan club. Hold on. All right.
Sister.
Nice.
All right, let's make sure everybody's muted except for, yep. Okay, good. The thing I hate doing most on this entire Feedback Friday. Okay.
Get ready to dance.
I'm gonna play some Emmylou Harris. I mean, yeah, for the newcomers, here's our theme song.
Well, it's the end of the week. Now where you been? Well, now it's Feedback Friday, so come on in. Come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. We're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
That is such a classic song, I have to say.
Classics.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Amy, I am transferring, letting people into you. Hello, I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and welcome to Feedback Friday, episode 124. Joining me today is Amy Dufault, Director of Communications, and we have some amazing guests today in conversation. So let me just go through that. For those of you who are new to Feedback Friday, this is our show where we talk with writers, artists, scholars, activists, farmers, dyers, textile folks, quilters, anybody who's interested in what we're interested, which is basically natural color, where it comes from, and textiles. So we're really happy that you're here with us. And today we're welcoming two folks who've been on Feedback Friday before, Tilke Elkins and Natalie Stopka. Tilke of Wild Pigment Project is an artist, writer, and curator, and she's focused on site-specific responsive painting and social practice art. Tilke's worked with mineral and botanical pigments since 2007 and is the founding director of Wild Pigment Project, a collaborative initiative she established in 2019 to promote ecological balance and regenerative economies. Right on, Tilke, through a passion for wild pigments, their places of origin, and their cultural histories. Natalie Stopka is a New York-based artist and educator focused on the material history of color. Also super fascinating stuff. She captures material and elemental interactions in her collaborative experimental art practice. Raised on the South Coast of Massachusetts, she earned a BFA from Rhode Island School of Design and an MFA from the University of New Mexico, Albuquerque. Natalie's also teaching a workshop with us in September. It's about invasive and ruderal pigments and how you can look around your own landscape and gather and create color and turn them into art materials that are suitable for painting, pastels, and surface applications. And that's open now on our site. Amy, I'm sure we'll add that to the chat. And if you're interested, please sign up. It's going to be a fascinating workshop. Okay, just a few reminders. Of course, the class. We also have the Catherine Ellis studio set, which is a set of recipe cards that you can use right on your work table when you're doing natural dye experiments. It's a pretty great little packaging and very informative. So if you're interested, if you do the types, if you like doing the type of really inquisitive and experimental natural dyeing that Catherine Ellis is known for, then you might want to look at possibly obtaining this book. It is a companion to her book, the one that she wrote with Joy Buttrop. So it would be an adjunct to it. It has a lot of the same information. One is not better than the other. They've both got great information in them. So I encourage you to have a look at that. Also, as I mentioned, Natalie's holding a workshop with us in September. And Tilke knows Heidi Gustafson well, and Heidi has written a book called The Book of Earth. And it's an incredible volume. Tilke and I were just talking before we let everybody in about biogenic ochres, and I knew what that meant. So yeah, Tilke showing us The Book of Earth is amazing. So our call's being recorded. You'll have a copy available to you after our presentation, and Amy is the person who is monitoring chat. We'll be also feeding questions to both Natalie and Tilke once we're done with their presentations. So, though you guys all know the drill, I'm welcoming Natalie and Tilke. Natalie's going to be presenting first. We're very excited to hear what she has to say. And to both of you, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. It's such a pleasure to be back with both you and Amy. And thank you, Tilke, for joining me in this conversation today. Let's see. Okay, this is me. The last time I was here at Feedback Friday, I spoke about my love of natural dyes and gardening and my journey into the history of natural colors. Part of that history I mentioned last time around was when I found a description of medieval clothlets, the little linen cloths saturated with plant juice and then dried as a way to stabilize and store color. A snippet of those cloths can later be soaked in water with a dash of alum and binder, and it becomes a paint. In the process of getting to know clothlets, my perusal of medieval and early modern dye recipes also led me to lake pigments. As a paper and a fabric marbler, these were of particular interest to me because I really wanted to move my practice away from synthetic pigments and acrylics. And I understood that prior to the advent of synthetics, historical marblers really loved something called lake pigments. Great color, and they float well, which is very important for marbling. I just had to figure out how to make them. So several years later, I now have a cupboard full of lake pigments, and I teach others how to make them too. And what they are fundamentally is a fusion of the botanical and the mineral worlds. So gorgeous color from plant and insect sources, attached to and stabilized by an aluminum mordant, thereby transmuted into insoluble pigment form. So now I'm not just a dyer and a marbler, I'm also a pigment person. And you can see in this slide, Amy told me 3 images. I'm bad at following rules, so I put a lot of images. So here is some tansy, and the 3 images in a row, you can see that's the lake pigment formation process, where the pigment is this cloud of opaque material that is starting to settle to the bottom of the liquid. And then on the right-hand side is the finished pigment in my mortar and pestle. So I believe it was 4 years ago that I discovered the Wild Pigment Project. And behind it, this really warm, intelligent, and welcoming person, Tilke, who has a very expansive perspective on pigment's place, wildness, foraging, and collaboration. I submitted some of my work not really expecting anything, and I offered to contribute a lake pigment to Groundbright, her monthly pigment subscription, which has at its core an ethos of reciprocity, community, and learning. She accepted my offer, which was fantastic. And even though it was pretty early days for Groundbright, it was the largest quantity of lake pigment I have ever made that I submitted to share with the group. 2 shades of both weld and tansy grown in my dye garden. So tansy is quite a buxom plant in my garden in New York. It's really vigorous, it seeds around, so I knew that I would have enough to work with to make this vast amount of lake pigment. And I knew also that in many parts of the country, tansy is not just vigorous, but it has been given the designation of an invasive species by the state government. Invasive plants get quite a knee-jerk reaction of strong dislike, and the term invasive is very weighted with undertones of militarism and xenophobia. So I'll be using words like introduced and overabundant to shade our appreciation of these plants with a little bit more nuance. I also use the word ruderal a lot, which is a different classification of plant. It comes from the Latin for rubble, and ruderal plants are those which grow in any sites of disturbance, of industrial sites. Any place there's friction where they can get a foothold, they're the first plants to spring up. So that's what a ruderal is, and it can be an invasive species, technically, it can be a native, or it could be an introduced species that has become naturalized over time. But what they are is vigorous, resilient, and the first to take root in disturbed ground. So since the time that I started working with tansy, I've been working with more and more of these vigorous, seemingly omnipresent plants, considering them to be a gift of color because they contain so much color. There's so many of these plants. They may be vilified, but some of them contain really beautiful and useful hues, as well as food sources, medicine, and fibers. Just trying to advance. Is there a secret, Amy?
Yeah, there
If you
is.
just click on the picture, Natalie, it'll go like at the bottom left.
Thank you. Okay. So this is buckthorn, Rhamnus cathartica. I found in my research a lot of medieval European recipes for ink and pigment made from common buckthorn, because buckthorn was a plant common in medieval Europe, but not in pre-colonial what is now America. The area where I live on the lower Hudson River, the ancestral lands of the Lenni Lenape, called Lenape-Hoking, we have a history roiled by tides of colonization, industrialization, and ongoing climate change. Buckthorn is a relative newcomer here from Europe in this ecosystem and so boisterous that it is labeled invasive by the state. Working with buckthorn was a lucky find for me because it has a mention in the written record to guide me. When I work with other introduced plant species, I'm stepping off of the well-trodden path of historically commodified colors, those colors which have made their way around the world and are rightfully renowned for their beautiful hues, as well as their cultural inheritance. These are our familiar characters. But most introduced species are not in the history books or the dye manuals. They are waste stream plants, plants that are taken for granted as weeds or mowed down, uprooted, sprayed with herbicides. So I feel, why not intervene on their way to the trash heap and continue my big project, perhaps our big project as a whole, reconnecting with the heritage of natural dyeing and also ushering it into the future. Because all of these plants are part of our future, our plant populations are changing with the effects of climate change, and the introduction of non-native plants just can't be undone. As I seek to work with them, I get to know them, and I find that the colors they contain are starting to represent for me dynamism and resilience in the natural world. And I'm starting to find even that it's easier to care for a plant than to hate a plant. And when I forage them, I follow a practice of care and reciprocity. I may take a lot of plant material from these overabundant species, but I do not spread it, I do not propagate it, and I do not leave a hole in the landscape when I take that plant material out. Foraging these plants is an opportunity to push back at their margins, to overseed or interplant native and naturalized species for greater biodiversity, and to rein in the overabundant species by building relationship with them. Weirdly enough, by actually caring for them. Here, they simply don't have the pressures and the predators that keep them bounded in their home ecosystems. So I'm foraging this little tenuous net of relationship. I'm not going to stem the tide, but it feels a lot better than just hating them. These plants are not the only ingredients in lake pigments. In my historical pigment research, which is like my armchair time travel of an evening, lots of different ingredients are mentioned. Yes, alum, but also marble dust, lye, wood ash, pearl ash, soda ash, limestone, lime water, eggshells, chalk, marley, and even cuttlefish bone. What each of these ingredients has is the capacity to neutralize the acidic alum. And what each of them represents is a particular place and its trash, its leftovers, its readily available dirt, dregs, and dross. Because our thrifty forebears knew, just by observational protochemistry, that each of these ingredients would function in the same way, and they worked with whatever they had on hand. Marble dust and slaked lime from the cloister perhaps being built at the local abbey, ashes from the fireplace, eggshells from the kitchen, cuttlefish bones just wash up on the beach. And the scribes who noted down these recipes are telling me across centuries to look to my trash too. I also have wood ashes in the wood stove. I have old slaked lime for my indigo vats. Slaked lime has a shelf life of about a year, so keep it in an airtight container. And I have eggshells destined for the compost. So what you see here are the eggshells from my parents' rescue chickens ground into dust. And this can be used in the process of making a lake pigment, gives it some opacity, or it can be used as an opaque white in water-based media on its own. And yes, the color of the eggshells does impart a slight tint to the finished pigment. So the thesis underpinning all of this work is about taking what opportunities are presented by whatever are the abundant materials in each of our own local ecosystems, even including the hated, the overlooked, the banal, the compost, It's about reconnecting with and reinventing dyes and pigments for our current moment. Because all of these materials are laden with heritage, with meaning, with import, and the ways that we engage with them are full of meaning and import as well. Okay. That's my 2 cents. Tilke?
That was like a fortune of 2 cents, I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't know where Tilke is, but I have to also interject that when you take a Natalie Stopka class, you get to hear all these really great sayings. Like I was just writing down armchair travel. I mean, she just comes out with these things that I'm like, what? It's always good.
Is Tilke still with us?
Yep. There's
Okay,
Tilke.
great.
Yep. Tilke, you're muted. Can Tilke say something so we can hear you?
Looks like she's still muted, Amy. Can we unmute her?
It's, I can ask to unmute, but hold on. But can you? Hold on. Hold on, let me. How strange. Kathy, when you hover above her name, does it make it it just says ask to unmute?
We'll get a view where I can see her better.
Ask to
Tilke,
unmute.
can you hit the little microphone in the bottom left-hand corner?
Oh, there you go.
You hear me now?
You're good.
Oh,
Yeah.
you found it.
You're
Okay.
good.
Access.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Michelle.
Okay. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Kathy and Amy, so much for having me back here. I was first here sharing in 2020, mostly about Wild Pigment Project. So please go back to that if you want to hear a lot about that, because I'm going to talk about some different stuff here. And thank you, Natalie, for inviting me to share this Feedback Friday with you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And for all of the support people in my life and for all the lands that support me and for these earth pigments that share so much with us. Natalie, touched on how our friendship relationship started early in the days of Ground Bright and Wild Pigment Project. I was so excited when she got in touch with me just out of the blue and was working with lake pigments, which I had just heard about. And it really was a phenomenal thing that Natalie did to make a Ground Bright contribution as a lake, because as many of you know, laking is a very slow and filled with love process. So I'm just really honored to share this conversation today. And what I have here for you is a kind of a visual dive into my process of relationships. So really what Natalie is talking about in this conversation about so-called invasive or ruderal plants is how she's going into relationship with these plants and kind of changing the lens from hating the plants and feeling like they're in the way to becoming a caretaker of these plants and giving them love and seeing how they fit into the relationship that Natalie has with them, and then the wider web of relationships. So this is a slight sort of like sidelong response to Natalie's work with these plants. And I'm actually not talking too much about plants. I'm going to talk about my relationship with waste stream pigments kind of at the end of this little sort of bath of color that I'm going to share with you. So the slides will go kind of quickly because there's a lot of them, but they can come back in conversation maybe, or you can just sort of have a nonverbal experience of what I want to share. So I'm essentially going to just tell you what my trajectory has been in my relationship with working with pigments. And in around 2007, I decided, so my work as an artist is about being immersed in a place and having relationships with every aspect of a place that I'm physically in. So I make work, for years I've been doing drawings. I spend hours outside, weeks really making drawings, and then I make paintings based on these drawings. And so what I want to share with you is kind of how my creative practice has deepened my, and has given birth to my relationship with materiality and webs of relationship with people and many beings. So these are the pigments that I started using in 2007. These are all they're natural pigments. So they're pigments from different minerals, different plants, and they're all pigments that I purchased from people online, and they're mostly from mines or from sort of small scale, but still somewhat industrial processes. So this was I really wanted to have bright colors with natural pigments. And so this was me kind of proving to myself, I can have a really electric palette. And this is also a bright palette. That's a lot of matter there. I'm not going to say too much about what you're seeing. I just want to give you a visual impression. So these are paintings that I made after making drawings outside and then coming back to my studio and painting with all these plant and botanical and mineral pigments. So I knew that I could make these pigments myself. And I read a book called Colors from the Earth by Anne Thomas. And I had this kitchen mortar that my generous mama had given to me from the kitchen. And I knew I could make paint, but it was just I was so overwhelmed by the power of that, of being able to do that, that it took me years to sort of come to that, but I did. And so I just want to sort of give you a little wave of what that looked like. And this is a series of images kind of from the last decade, really, of me making paint. And I'm going to sort of go backwards, but these are some greens from Kalapuya lands and the processes of making rock into paint. Green figures really prominently for me because it's a color with a lot of dimensions, and it's present in many of the places where I'm drawing and am immersed in place. So then I just really started to see color everywhere in the landscape and learn and deepen my vision of that. And these are just different ways that I have connected with locating mineral color in place. And I know this is quick, but it's just kind of an impression here in this short presentation. So these are all colors from one place. And that was a key moment to me. That was something I was feeling into understanding. Can I find a hyperlocal, what I now call a hyperlocal palette, a palette that comes really just from one place? And you'll see how that becomes more and more relevant. So these are all from one place. And here they are. And this is my experience of buckthorn. Some people have an allergic reaction to buckthorn, so I don't necessarily recommend doing this, but I just love to touch. So these are buckthorn, and this is the paint that I made from buckthorn. Such a gorgeous deep color. This is charcoal. I learned to make charcoal. This is a paint set. And so this is kind of what my palette feels like. And so this is now what it looks like at this point. I've moved from the purchased mined pigments to pigments that I've connected with place and come to myself, or there's actually some ground bright pigments in this image as well. And so this is now what my palette looks like. And these leaves became kind of a symbol for Wild Pigment Project, which was my next step. And that was So this is an image that has a lot of meaning to me that I'm not going to go too deeply into, but it was an intuitive process where through the making of this image, which I did by making sketches, gathering my own pigments. It was the first large, this is about 8 by 7, and it was the first large painting that I made with pigments that I foraged myself. And through this painting, I came into connection with Wilson Wiwa, Northern Paiute elder, and had a conversation about what it meant to me to gather pigments from the land. So I realized, yeah, and actually just a quick aside, I was really exploring like, how does working with these pigments feel different to working with other pigments? So in that 4-image grid, which for me was a little bit in my imagination was kind of an echo of Monet's cathedral paintings of light. This was paintings with different kinds of pigments. So going clockwise, there's the foraged pigments, and then there's the synthetic, organic, so petroleum-based pigments. And below that, there are plant pigments. And then to the left of that, there are mineral pigments, but they're mined. So it was my kind of impression of impressionism through pigments. So I began Wild Pigment Project, an online platform that has a directory that brings people together from all over the world to see people who are sort of working in a deep way with pigments and have a level of experience and are also sharing generously. Natalie Stopka was an early person who joined this. And has had such an impact on the pigment community with her generous sharing. Learning about eggshells as a paint, by the way, has really changed my life. And I learned that from Natalie. So this was to bring together people to have conversations about what it means to forage, what it means for me as a descendant of colonial settlers, and what it means for people who are on their ancestral lands or are in relationship with their communities that are in relationship with lands ancestrally. And the conversations through this project have been incredible, but I'm not going to go into that too much. Just if you don't know about this website, it has it's a portal into connecting with people who work with dyes and paints and pigments of all kind. So Ground Bright has been alluded to. This is the subscription, and I'm just going to show some images here. This is what these each one is contributed by a different artist who is in a different kind of relationship with the pigment. And in the past 6 months plus, actually, Ground Bright has shifted into working exclusively with waste stream pigments. Here is Caroline Ross, whose book Found in Ground, which is an amazing book about making watercolors from forage materials, is just coming out right now this month. This is Spoils, one of her contributions. And this is all the Ground Bright pigments. This was part of a show at Form and Concept Gallery that was part of a large curated Wild Pigment Project group exhibition. Back to my practice. I really was realizing that I wanted to move from painting on canvases or wood inside to moving outside. And for years, I've been having steps and broadening my experience of painting on and with the landscape. So I took these pigments, and I was actually here. I was in a site on Dawnland, Wabanaki lands, also known as Vermont, a place that I've been at since I was a child. And this is a tiny painting that has a sort of monumental size feeling, but it's applying pigments to rock in a very private, sort of secret, non-public place. And this is what this looks like. So working with the compositional elements of the land and essentially spending time being with is the term that I use. Being with place, because when I'm there, I hear the birds, I'm watched by the birds. I go back day after day. I get to know the spiders and the light and the fish and the osprey. And I make these tiny paintings, which they wash off. This is what they look like after a year. So they're ephemeral paintings. I was given a beautiful invitation to have a show in a gallery here where I am right now, actually in Ogopogo, Owingeh, colonially known as Santa Fe, New Mexico, by Jordan Eddy, the director of Form and Concept. And so this was a chance to have work inside in a gallery. So I wanted to bring this experience of my being with place into the gallery through a series of 3 double-sided large paintings. So I'm just going to show you those pine trees are trees I've been climbing since I was a tiny child. And this is my process of climbing these trees, being with them. This painting was called Parents because they are one of my sets of parents, and making these drawings up in the trees. And then I actually brought these back to the other side of the continent with me, and I made this painting. So just skipping now, I'm back on the other side of the country, and I'm working on this series of paintings. And here's the lush moss on Kalapuya territory, also known as Oregon. And I'm just spending a lot of time making drawings with this place, and working with pigments that are exclusively from this place, because I realized that what I want to do is I want to make these paintings and I want to offer them for sale, but I want to rent the pigments. So this is the shift in my relationship with pigments here. They're all from one place. I want to sell this board that the painting is on. It's double-sided. There's a painting on both sides. And then have a relationship with whoever purchases it such that they rent the pigments, and each year that they rent the pigments, the funds go to someone I have a picture of. I will show you in a sec. That's just an image of what my studio looks like when I'm working on these giant paintings. Sorry to be so quick here. This is the last one. Making drawings in this place. That's what this looks like. And then here's a detail of the resulting painting. There it is. And so I wanted the funds from this. Here they are in the gallery. They had to hang because they're double-sided. See how that looks. And I wanted the funds to go to this woman, Esther Stutzman, who is a Kalapuya elder, who is at the center of a project to rematriate land. She has worked with the people who published this Kalapuya dictionary to revitalize the Kalapuya language. She's been teaching culture camps for 40 years, and now she's involved in this land rematriation. So the vision is for this rent money from the paintings to go back to Esther and her project once I've washed them off. So that's a whole thing. Here's the Chatu Menma, the land rematriation. Just to finish up, how am I doing with time? Am I okay here? Okay. So one thing about those giant paintings was that they are just so big that so far no one has stepped forward to engage in the considerable project that it is to buy one of these paintings and to rent the pigments and to be in the relationship. So with this in mind, I was really honored to receive a residency, a 5-week residency at Sitka Center and on Oregon's coast, Cascade Head. And I got there, and you can see by my face, I was just like overwhelmed with the beauty and the privilege to be there. And my intention was to work in this way where I could return pigments to place, but I didn't know if there'd even be any pigments in this place. The beach, when I first went there, looked very neutral. But as I explored, I found that there was iron, a lot of iron in this place, and actually so many colors. And so I spent the time there being with this place, and it became a ceremonial process. And I sort of called this experience and created these ceremonies for being with. And what I did was something I've always wanted to do, which was that I entered the place with just a paintbrush and started to make work. While I was there, I had the great fortune to go to Chichalu Museum and Cultural Center, which is the Grand Ronde Center, and they do a beautiful thing, which is that they have these ancient mortar and pestles. I mean, ancient, thousands of years old, and they have them out where they have them out to be in relationship with people who visit the museum, so you can touch them, you can hold them. They also have pigments there that are culturally relevant, and you can touch those and hold those. So that was very magic. I also was connected through Chichalo to this tribal elder, Ann Lewis, who's an artist, and she and some friends came and foraged with me on the beach, and we had an amazing time doing that. And her ancestors are from that place, so that was very powerful for me and big honor. So I started to just work with these pigments with rocks as my tools and create the paint on the beach. And this is a quick aside, just to show you sometimes, things go in a funny direction when you're working. This is like a vulnerable moment for me. I wanted to paint rocks as I had done on the other side of the country. And I did that. And I looked at these and my heart just plummeted. And I looked at this brilliant rock in this landscape and realized my relationship with this place didn't allow me to do this, to make this kind of visual impact on a place. And it was below the high tide line. So I just, on a very private beach. So I just waited until the tide came in and I knew I couldn't do that there. I tried painting on the undersides of rocks, but that wasn't quite it. So I found this board and that had washed up and I realized this is my heritage. This is waste. This has been orphaned. It's been chucked out. And I started to paint on that with these pigments. And I'm wrapping up here, but I just want to show you what that looked like. And I did this again in another spot. Just going to move through these quickly in the interests of time. So these are all painted with a piece of wood that I found in the place with the pigments there, just a paintbrush, and there's ceremonies for being with these places. And one of these pieces is currently on view at NMSU in Las Cruces until September, along with a beautiful whole show of works, including pigments by Natalie Stopka, Wild Pigment Project, big exhibition. Really a big honor to be in this place and work with the amazing crew here. And there's the little headphones that you can see there are the recorded ceremonies. This piece may appear this fall at Form and Concept Gallery if you're interested in engaging that process. And here finally are the waste stream pigments that I work with. And I'm happy to talk more about these, but these are paintings made from paints made from so-called trash. That I find really dynamic and exciting to work with. So thank you. Sorry if I talked
No, Tilke, no apologies. This is amazing. Thank you so much. I know there are many questions, so Amy is just going to jump in and start asking. Thank you, Tilke.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Amy,
Natalie, yeah, I see your face looking like you want to ask something. Yes.
I have questions too.
Okay. Let me spotlight the two of you.
So I've been reading these books by Pamela H. Smith on artisan knowledge in the early modern period, and she uses the phrase habits of attention, which describes a process of observation, not just with the eyes, but with other senses. It's like a manner of being attuned to materials and open to what they can tell us through any valence of sensory communication. And like natural dyers, we all know, the textures of our fibers and the scents of our plants and the noises of our dye pots, for example. So when we're foraging color, whether it's from plants or rocks, we're always, our antennae are up and we're very receptive. We have these habits of attention. Do you have any terms or metaphors for your state of mind or body when you're working in the landscape?
Great question. I love that. Yeah, well, as I said, the primary term for me is being with and communicating, listening, being in dialogue. So for me, it's one thing to say everyone is alive, all beings are alive, plants and rocks are alive, but it's another to say I'm listening for actual communication. So doing that by, as you say, opening the senses to visual communication, to intuitive communication, to dreams, to sounds, to beings that appear at certain moments, to smells, to really the full sensorium. I love that term, the sensorium, every part of our senses. And it is a trance state, it's dropping in and it's atymial, it's outside of time. And it's a collaboration. So it's receiving communication and then giving communication and then receiving that dialogue and being open to the timing of that being, immediate or taking years. But just really really recognizing that there is a dialogue and that there is a communication, and that as Robin Wall Kimmerer, writer and scientist, and actually Sitka Center alum says, you know that you love the earth, but do you know that the earth loves you? So it's receiving as well as transmitting. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Being with, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Did you have any questions for Natalie, or?
Yeah, I do. I think in that vein, I'm really interested, Natalie, in kind of ways that these ruderal or invasive plants have intersected with your personal histories, and or either ancestral or just personal moments that are dear to you, that where you felt communication, or you felt the way that plants have changed you, or ways that these plants have appeared in your own studio work, your beautiful, profound, and kind of very atmospheric and moody marbling works, such as the one that you had in the show last fall at Form and Concept. I'm interested in your relationship with a plant, if you have anything about that you'd like to share.
Yeah, in the vein of being open, when you're looking at the landscape around you, and on the East Coast, we're impacted by so many rambunctious species. They're just right in front of you, ready, willing, and able to be collaborated with in the studio. So it was almost like not seeing the forest for the trees for a long time, growing plants in my dye garden, focusing on light fast colors, especially, and then I was like, I read references to a number of these plants. Let's try them. And that process has also included letting go. I've already noticed some questions about light fastness in the chat. Letting go of some of how prized light fastness is, because to work with introduced species is to acknowledge that our landscapes are shifting and changing, and that everything changes and that everything passes. We all know that all botanical colorants will eventually fade to some degree, some faster, some slower. And to embrace that is to say, this artwork that I've made is a series of moments, and you can appreciate each one, please. And it may be fleeting, and it will be more precious because of that. So I'm aware that it's going to change, and I accept that it's going to change.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful and powerful, and it sort of echoes my feelings about washing pigments off and returning them, and it makes the relationship very active, because you're watching for that change, and you're watching for how it affects your piece, and it's like watching light change from within the canvas. Yeah.
I've taken this impulse even a little farther, and I've been working with intentionally corrosive pigments that will eat through the substrate over time. And some people are immediately just horrified that I should do that. But it is an impulse to say, no, just look at it right now.
I'd love that. That's incredible. And it sort of moves from 2D to 3D. It makes your piece sculptural. It says it's not just the surface, it's through and the other side. Wow, that's fantastic. Do you want to share some of those corrosive materials that you're working with?
I'm working with iron-based, corrosion right now, which iron is so promiscuous, it wants to eat through everything. So it's not hard to make it corrode something, as we all know. We know this from the dye studio. And I think at the end, I don't know how long the process will take, but I'll have like a pile of dust that I can put on the compost. And that's similar to returning your pigments to the land. That's saying, okay, it's back in the loop. And it's a goal that I don't know I can ever attain, but to have my studio waste, it should all be compostable, It should all just be able to go back into the land and even into my food system. And that's the degree of like safety that I want.
Yeah, I love that. I think that I love that you use the word safety, because I think that people associate permanence with safety. But like you, I associate cycles and circularity with safety. So I love that you've put it that way. And I also think it's hilarious that people think that that organic synthetic pigments are light fast, because they're actually much less light fast than a lot of the natural pigments, as I'm sure has been mentioned here on Feedback Friday many times, because this is a familiar conversation. But I love that you're really deeply leaning into that, those cycles, Natalie, and just incorporating them into your work and sort of teaching them to people through viewing your work. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think I'm going to jump into some questions, because while you're both talking about these sort of extra things, or maybe you mentioning waste, somebody was asking, how do you both define waste, like waste stream pigments is the question. How do you both define waste stream pigments?
Yeah. Natalie?
I would just say it's anything that has lost its value in our eyes for some reason, whether it's been forgotten, discarded, it's downtrodden, it's just looked down on. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think for me, it's materials that have fallen out of relationship with humans that were in relationships. So they came out of a human relationship and then were sort of fell out of relationship with humans. They're still in relationship with everyone else, in various ways, but they are sort of orphaned from the human relationship. So finding ways to, and they often are the result of damage to, or extractive damage or pollution, or interference with other species. And so to go towards materials that when you have a relationship with them, you're bringing them into a more vibrant and life-giving relationship. Materials that you can do that with, I would call waste stream materials. Everything from these, pulled up weeds, so-called weeds, or things from kitchen waste or garden waste, to acid mine drainage pigment that comes from polluted waterways that are just leaching iron into the water and making the water too opaque for the fish and other beings to see. When that's removed from the waste, from the waterways, it becomes this beautiful iron oxide that can be used as paint. And many artists all over the world are working with this material now. And that I call a waste stream material, but I don't actually love that term, because it invokes, sewage, or it's not the best term. But I also, in that sense, I don't like it, but I like it in the sense that it's kind of dirty and gritty. And in the pigment world that can sometimes feel too seamless aesthetically and thematically, I like that we're talking about waste stream, and some of it literally does come out of sewage. I mean, there's Vivianite, as Heidi Gustafson has just been writing about in her brilliant book of Earth. Vivianite comes from sewage from slaughterhouses and other waste. So it does apply in that sense.
Yeah. That the pictures that Heidi has of that too, of like a pipe with the blue inside it, is just incredible. Let's see, Tilke, how many of your colors are sourced from unaltered mineral colors, and how many are altered due to heating or chemical processes?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So when I showed that first, the very first slide of all the little vials, those were a range of pigments that were mostly, I mean, there actually was only one in there that was altered by a human intervention. So just for those of you who maybe want some clarity about what we're talking about here, humans have been producing pigments and using natural materials, but heating them or combining them in a kind of alchemical process. And those are, it depends who you talk to, but those can be called synthetic pigments, because they are not as they were found just on the ground. So now, when I was first exploring pigments, I did have the score for myself that was, I want to use only pigments that are as they're found. Egyptian blue was an exception because it was beautiful, and it was some people consider it the first synthetic pigment ever made. It's copper and sand and heated, and was used to make glass. But the pigments that I work with now that are foraged that are mineral and botanical are just as they are found. And the waste stream pigments are altered, some of them. So the eggshells are not, I consider eggshells the waste stream pigment, but the iron oxides that I work with, I soak iron like old nails in vinegar and salt. And if you want it to go really fast, a little hydrogen peroxide. And then copper is soaked in vinegar and salt as well. So that's changing and sort of making a pigment. And lake pigments are not as they're found, that's a chemistry process. So yeah. Does that answer that question?
Sure it does. Let's see, hold on. I think we have one more question. And people are asking definitely like very particular things, like what do you use as a binder, and what are the glass vials that you use? Do you have a source? But we could always put that in the video recording, but maybe you could both talk to this. Layla's asking, I'd love to ask how either speaker organizes their pigments and collected materials at different stages to keep track of the site. I make earth and fungus pigments and really struggle with a satisfying system. Like, you two seem so organized with all your pigments and the color. No, Natalie's like, it's all smoke and mirrors. But do you have some type of a system of how you organize them?
No, I just label every container with what it is. That's partly for safety and partly because there's, particular reasons I would want to use a particular pigment in a place. And I know in my memory where each of them is from. So I don't have a great system. And I don't like to keep them as a cabinet of curiosities either. I like to have a large quantity of pigments and plant material always, so that I can have creative opportunity in the studio to engage with them, not just look at them,
Yeah. Wonderful. I can echo Natalie by saying that I've really shifted in my approach to that. The two images of the vials, those are kind of, I consider them my teaching library, and I now don't gather pigment unless I'm really spoken to by a particular small rock to take with me from a place. I, for the most part, don't do that. And because my score is to go to a place and work with whoever is there as my pigments. And that really has changed it. And it's been a discipline for me to kind of move in that direction. But like as Natalie said, instead of having pigments as a collection where they tend to sort of fall out of relationship, they're not engaged, to just really be working in this kind of, for me, freeing way where I know that my studio is where I go. When I do bring materials back to my studio, I like to have no more than I can remember. So I'm really leaning into this. And I have when I do keep things in jars, my favorite way to do it is to write on a piece of paper, put it inside the jar, put the lid on. I don't use sticky labels, but I'm moving in the direction of really only having materials that I'm in enough of a relationship with where I can identify them by sight. And that keeps the sort of accumulating down. And I take materials back to wherever I use them, had them from when I'm not using them. So it's people have all different ways of doing them. There are archivists out there that are so important for us, who have these big collections of materials, and who that's a big global public resource where they're able to share and show this incredible diversity of pigments all in one place. But for others, it's very easy to become overwhelmed and to have things fall out of the energetic relationship. So that's kind of my take on that.
Well, thanks for your answer. Thanks for we're gonna wrap things up. I know there's a bunch of questions and there's a lot of good questions too, but just being respectful of everyone's time. Hey, if you take a class with Natalie Stopka, you could ask her all kinds of questions during that class. So
Get ready, Natalie.
if you wanna, just
Tilke, you're next.
Tilke.
Natalie is one of the funniest people I know. So
Really?
she is a stand-up comedian in this very,
Right.
dry way, but I have been rolling on the floor in
Oh
Natalie's.
my God. I was a TA for her class
Really?
once and I'm like, oh my God, what? I just kept putting things in hashtags that she was saying. It was the most ridiculous, yet most
Exactly.
amazing thing ever. But
Yeah.
I also want to just say before we leave, thanking you both, but that, as part of these alumni, Feedback Friday alumni discussions, when I reach out to people and I say, who of 120, whatever people would you want to have a conversation with that, of all those people, and Natalie had picked you, Tilke. So
It's
it
big
was,
on. Thank you, Natalie.
yeah, I was like, I love the alumni having the conversations because there's just so much good stuff that happened between the two. So thank you both for that.
Thank you, because we've never met in person, and this is the longest conversation we've ever had the pleasure of having. So it's been great.
My
Oh
God.
my goodness. We're going to have to make sure that you two meet in person. This is crazy.
So much meeting in person needs to happen.
So much meeting in person
Down with
needs
it.
to happen. You're absolutely right.
That happened.
Okay.
And Kathy for
Thank
this.
you.
for
Thank
continuing
you.
to
Thank
offer
you.
this. It's such an amazing thing that you do with Feedback Friday.
Oh, thank you. I couldn't do it without Amy, believe me. It's been a lot of teamwork. It's been great. All right, we're going to go ahead and unmute and everybody can say hello, goodbye, and greet each other. I know there's lots of old friends here, Zoom friends and friends in person. And I have to ask Janice Whale, what is the color of your
Yeah, what is going on?
screen? It
It's
is
like she's
so
in a
amazing.
marijuana grow room or something.
I don't know. It does it on its own. It did it yesterday too. So
Oh, did it? It's really cool.
I
Well,
think that the service is weak or something, and like the
Oh,
Wi-Fi.
sure you're
is-
not in a
there's some-
marijuana growing.
No, it did yesterday too. I was perfect
Just
color,
admit
and
it,
then
it's
went to
okay.
sign off, and so after an hour maybe it doesn't like it. I don't know.
Janice,
Oh,
it's okay. You can admit it. Well, I
might
get
be
it.
your like a display or something. All right. Amy, I'm gonna run. I have
Hey, yeah.
Takayuki's workshop
That's-
starting, so I'm gonna head over there.
Well, did you want to stop the recording?
Oh yes, I can do that.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you.